yes, Mzansi, welcome back. Your feel-good breakfast show opening up on S3, and right now opening up to some pertinent conversation, especially when we dive into the realm of finances. Now listen, last week Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana announced the withdrawal of the proposed increase in value-added tax, which was set to rise from 15% to 15.5%, and that's in the next few days on the 1st of May. But this decision came after extensive consultations with political parties and careful consideration of parliamentary recommendations. Now, the reversal is significant, and yes, it was a reversal, as it maintains the VAT at a rate of 15%. Now, this is alleviating concerns about the potential financial burden on consumers, and I think especially low-income households. And the proposed VAT hike aimed to address a projected 75 billion rand revenue shortfall over the medium term. How are we going to make up for this? We'll find out now. But the decision to maintain the current VAT rate underscores the government's responsiveness to public and political concerns. So we had to bring in a proper panel to dive into this one. So joining us in studio, we have Werner de Soo, Wealth Manager at PPS Wealth Advisory, and then we have media personalities Danilo Aquesto as well as Kayizi in the building. And we brought them here because we thought they're not just family members, but they're the kind of people we can relate to in these crazy times. You can be the voice for the people, and that's why we've got you here. So gentlemen, thank you firstly for being here this morning. And how are we all doing? We're good?
Great.
I like that. Werner, I'm going to dive into this conversation with you first, just so we can paint a picture for many of us that don't understand this world. What is VAT? What exactly is a VAT increase, and how does it affect South Africans, essentially? How does it affect me, the everyday person living in this country?
So VAT is literally the one tax that influences everyone. Whether you buy your morning coffee, buy a chocolate, do your groceries, buy a new car, you will pay that 15% tax on it. VAT was introduced in 1991, and I think it was 11% then, increased to 14% in 1993, and then only in 2018 where it was increased to 15%. Obviously, we saw in the news the last month what's been happening. They wanted to increase it with 2%, then 0.5%, then the court cases came, small parties, big parties, no one knows what's going, who actually decided this, but yeah, there's no more increase in VAT.
And it sounds like people are celebrating this. Daniela, you're someone that wears so many hats, right? So I think anything that changes affects your world. Whether you're being a presenter, a good-looking guy, an entrepreneur, you wear so many hats. As an entrepreneur, I'd imagine that this definitely has a personal impact. What was your sort of thoughts when you heard that, firstly, there's going to be an increase, and then realizing that it's been reversed? Was this confusion? Was this like confidence for you?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of confidence in the government to look after our money as it is. So I think generally speaking, whenever these things happen, there's a lot of like like Casey did, it's like fingers in the on your nose. And obviously in the world of business, it really doesn't affect us too much because our job is to obviously, we're just considered VAT vendors. So we just pass money along and pass it across. It's a required addition to the cost price of our work. But what it does affect is the consumer, which does impact us. Obviously, we're companies trying to sell to consumers. And so the less money they have, or when price starts to impact their decision making, companies make less money. So I suppose at the time, we were all disappointed by the increase because we just feel like they cannot manage the sort of fiscal as it stands, that why again pass this burden on to consumers. But a 75 billion rand shortfall is a lot of money. You know, most of the people that I've spoken to have all said, well, why don't we cut the politicians' salaries, the bloated cabinets, get rid of the people? And I crunched the numbers, and I think that'll only raise like between 1 and 2 billion. And to get to 75 billion, we need to do a lot more from a country reform perspective to get there. So we were upset. I'm glad to see that it was withdrawn. I'm a bit concerned by the big companies because they all had to go through operational changes to try and figure out how they were going to increase this VAT, collect it, pass it on, refund it. And so it was a little bit too little, too late from the government, but I think we're grateful that at least consumers, the everyday people, you and I, our bread stays the same.
That's what I wanted to chat about, Nkizi. I feel like you can represent the people, man. You understand that a lot of us have been having various sort of reactions to this. I'm sure you heard a lot of it on your side. I mean, you're speaking to the people directly. But how do you think this actually plays out in terms of what the people are understanding the situation to be? Are they feeling heard now, seeing that, hey, you seem to be listening? I don't know, I use that word very loosely. Are you listening to us?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things to look at. Firstly, just to go back to Danilo, we're not we're not happy that it's at 15%. Let's
start there. Yeah,
We're just accustomed to it because South Africans have been stretched already.
Absolutely.
Now, with that initial 2% increase, we were going to be stretched even more as consumers. But it being at 15 is saying, okay, cool, I'm accustomed to this, but it's still hurting South Africans, and that's for your everyday South Africans. I'm not talking about your wealthy South Africans.
Yeah.
I'm talking about your lower and middle class South Africans.
Because this is who this is where the effect is really felt, right?
It stretches them
Your
immediately
purchasing
already.
powers is now adjusted. Your ability
Absolutely.
to just live is now being compromised as well, right?
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. And you're going to see it in people's spending behavior as well. You're going to be seeing it and hearing it. And my listeners are going to be staying at home. You're going to be hearing of more carpools. You're going to be hearing of more e-hailing. All of that just for you to be able to survive in South Africa as a
Hey, man. And Vanna, we speak about the 75 billion rand loss from not being able to implement this. But where does this loss come from, and why must the people be the ones that are paying for it? Why are the low-income people that are really driving this country, that are like the workforce, why is it now their problem? Why is it our responsibility?
Great question.
Yeah, well, if we look at it, the 75 billion is over the next 3 years. It's not only this year. So I think a lot of this is some politics. In the next year, it's only 10 billion. And if you listened in the news, about 3 weeks ago, SARS said they over-collected 10 billion on their estimation. So we've already made it up.
Wait, so they got some spare change?
From over
Leave us
collection.
alone.
So, yeah, I feel that we don't need that. We don't need to raise that money. It's all politics, and it's getting in the way of consumers.
All right. Well, look, you three are not getting in the way of good conversation. We're going to carry on this in just a bit. I feel like I'm already educated. I'm feeling the implications of this, but we're going to dive into this conversation and get a little bit deeper into how this is affecting us and maybe what we can do now that this world is forever changing, especially in our current economy. For now, though, let's take a breather. I think we can relax and get some entertainment going before diving into some more of this conversation.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Oh, yes, Mzansi, welcome back. Your feel-good breakfast show, carrying on with incredible conversations right here and pertinent ones at that. Everything to do with VAT. We've had a little discussion. We've educated ourselves, but let's find out what we can do about it. Obviously, the increase of the VAT, the government is now facing the challenge of addressing this 75 billion rand revenue gap without compromising fiscal sustainability. Now, Finance Minister Godongwana has indicated plans to introduce revised budget legislation focusing on expenditure, and I think this is going to be an adjustment to cover that shortfall. Now, this situation raises critical questions about alternative revenue sources and the broader economic implications. So, next up, let's see how we can explore the options, such as maybe enhancing tax compliance, stimulating economic growth, and maybe prioritizing spending. Our esteemed panel is still with us to share their insights on how these decisions could affect South Africans across different sectors. Gents, again, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, being a relatable panel as well, because it's so difficult to understand a lot of these complex terms and the situation we're currently in. The 75% sort of deficit. What would you suggest, maybe, Vanna, is another option at finding this money without us having to bear the burden? Is there another option to figure out how to get 75 billion rand? I mean, how does one even do this? Where do we begin?
I'd like to know.
Yeah.
So if you look at your own budget, you've got income and expenditure. If you
Yes.
don't have enough money, you have to cut.
Yes.
So government needs to start cutting on, do we really need to send troops to the DRC that costs us 5 billion rand? Do we need to spend 3 billion rand on VIP protection? All these, there's so many of these examples. So we need to start cutting on expenditure. We need to have an economy that can grow, to have more taxpayers, so create jobs so that there's more people that can pay tax.
All right.
That's the only option.
So one or the other,
government
cut
is, government is
increase
forced to do
growth?
it now, yeah.
All right, so Danilo, maybe from your side, I know you have creativity in abound, especially when it comes to being an entrepreneur, right? So how would you, let's say, putting you in the shoes of a finance minister, would you have any alternate solutions in terms of how we could stimulate the economy and raise this revenue, which is maybe more on the positive side of this conundrum?
Yeah, his job isn't easy, and I get it. It's a really hard thing. Anytime you want to add revenue, you put pressure on some other places.
Yeah, something's got to give.
So it isn't easy. But I would say the key things, there's a very low trust in government to look after money right right now. And so I think, as Vanna mentioned, a really good sort of look at sort of protocols around sort of where our expenditure is going. But even, I know I've heard lots of commentary on social, people saying things like, oh, why do we pay our politicians so much money? And if we were to just reduce their salaries by, like, let's say 20% overall, would only raise between 1 and 2 billion. We still
so
need to
that's
get,
not gonna cut it,
a lot. So some of the key sort of large-scale sort of changes we can make is one is reform to our current spending. Second, as you mentioned in your opening, a lot of tax compliance issues. The really rich people and really rich corporations are finding very clever ways to avoid the tax man. And I think there is a need for us to reform the way that we collect.
Creative accounting.
Yeah, from the rich. There is a balance to do with rich people and sort of and rich companies. There's obviously always a flight risk that if you start taxing the rich, you can raise another 20 to 50 billion quite easily by getting even just a 2% increase in income tax for the rich.
Oh, wow.
But then the likelihood of them wanting to leave the country is what people are worried about, is they take their money elsewhere. But the reality is there is nowhere else for them to go. Taxes everywhere in the world. I know we're one of the most heavily taxed countries in the world, but there is very little happening at a global scale to protect them from tax elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And so we do need to try and find a way to take rich corporations, so highly profitable, large-scale organizations, looking at our state-owned enterprises. We can save 20, 40 billion, I'd imagine, just by like restructuring our state-owned enterprises. The amount of times we've bailed those out, their inefficiencies in expenditure. Like those are the really big-ticket items. State-owned enterprises, the rich corporations, and then looking at our expenses, just to kind of like neaten up how we spend our money. That'll probably raise far more than 75 billion in the long run, and is a more sustainable way to look after our balance
Sure,
sheet.
bro. Any thoughts of maybe joining the cabinet there, man? I mean, it seems like
Never
your
in
skills
finance.
are wasted.
They're the most hated. I don't want to be hated. Yeah.
Okay, Easy. Obviously, someone that's on the ground, you're hearing what the people have to say about this often, right? I would imagine that when that initial increase came through, there was this just like disappointment and anger and frustration and like, what more do you want from me? With the change and with, let's say, the fact that there has been this reversal, do you think that South Africans are starting to believe that there is this sort of impact and notion of like, listen, we can be heard. We should be voicing our opinions more. We should be getting more involved in what matters to us. Do you think that's important here?
I think what's really interesting is that everyone seems to be claiming a victory and being the reason
For
that
the-
this happened.
I noticed
Partly
that.
because this is obviously going to connect into the local cabinets, number one. Number two, in that next voting stage, you're going to be thinking who is or what is the party that got us to, stay at 15%. So there's definitely a political play here as well. Let's not underestimate what is actually happening. I'm sure there's some magic SMSs everybody received from certain people, So I think that's very key. What is really awesome to see is that the needs of the people are being heard. And it's being done through GNU. And it's not from one individual party, but it's parties coming together and saying, guys, we cannot do this and we cannot get away with this for much longer. And going back to what Werner is saying, now we all have to collectively look at our budget, look at our expenditure, and then that trickles down into your everyday South African.
So it's beautiful here that there is someone that is remotely taking some form of accountability, which I think in this country is something that we don't often get. We always, I wouldn't say looking for someone to blame, but we never have any resolution in dealing with these sort of negativities. It's like, we just got to deal with it. At least now there's a reason, there's something that we can look forward to. As a takeaway, do you think that this reversal means that the mood of the country is increasing as well? As an overall, do you think that this is the right step forward? I mean, there isn't a perfect step forward, but we are moving, are we not?
You chopped us off at the knees and then gave us a shoe. I don't understand why you made us feel really low and then maybe we're 2% high. But I do think that there is, the hope is this GNU that Casey mentioned quite well. I heard Badana mention it next to me here as well too. The sense that government itself is able to hold itself accountable because the power shift has happened. Our democracy hasn't served us for the last while because obviously there's a lot of political playing in who gets votes and how that happens. Now that there's a bit more balance in cabinet, you're seeing pushback on things that do affect us on the daily. So that's hopeful.
I think it's a victory for the people, victory for democracy. If you look back at 2018, the last time when VAT was increased, can you remember it? It was a non-event. No one even talked to it. We just had to pay it. And now with this, the GNU, and we have to give the DA And then the EFF that joined them in the court case, we have to give them due for ensuring, keeping the government accountable, and we're not paying that extra tax. And it wouldn't have happened if the people didn't vote for this.
If the people didn't vote and didn't talk, and maybe even if it's just a whisper, it sounds like the people suddenly have a voice for once in this country, and I'm here to celebrate exactly that. So, gentlemen, thank you for educating us. I know it's a very complex issue that we need to try to bite into and understand, but you all have done that perfectly, and giving us a little bit more confidence and putting us at ease. And thank you for being a voice for all the people as well. I think you're representing more than just yourselves, and that's what we also appreciate. So, yeah, happy extended Freedom Day, and continue with this democracy in South Africa as it hopefully increases, and as we hopefully continue to be heard as a people in this country and make positive impact and changes. Thanks, gents.
Great. Thanks.